Imagine finding yourself alone in the open ocean. No shoreline, no boat, no reef beneath your feet, just water stretching in every direction until the horizon dissolves into the sky. Beneath you lies a world that remains largely unseen, landscape of darkness, pressure, and distance so vast that even today much of it remains unexplored. Somewhere within that immense blue wilderness lives an animal capable of killing almost anything it chooses. An animal that hunts sharks, an animal that hunts dolphins, an animal that hunts seals, an animal that can coordinate attacks on whales many times its own size, an animal so effective that marine biologists often describe it as the true apex predator of the sea. People would assume that encountering such a creature in open water would represent the most dangerous situations imaginable once. Yet one of the strangest facts in the natural world suggests something entirely different, because despite centuries of encounters between humans and wild orcas, despite divers entering the water beside them, despite sailors, researchers, photographers, swimmers and fishermen sharing the ocean with them, there is no confirmed case of a wild orca intentionally killing a human. Fact sounds almost impossible. In many ways, it should. If somebody described a predator capable of hunting great white sharks and whales, but told you that humans appeared to be excluded from its menu, it would sound like fiction. It would sound like one of those stories nature documentaries exaggerate to make an animal seem more mysterious than it really is. Yet in this case, the mystery is entirely real. The more scientists learned about orcas, the stranger the situation became, because everything we know about these animals suggests they should be among the most formidable predators on Earth. And yet, humans occupy a position in their world that seems almost unique. To understand why that matters, it helps to forget everything you think you know about killer whales. The name itself has shaped public perception for generations. It evokes images of danger, violence, and relentless predation. It sounds less like the name of an animal, and more like the title of a villain. For much of modern history, people viewed orcas through exactly that lens. Fishermen shot them. Governments organised culls against them. They were blamed for declining fish populations and treated as competitors rather than wildlife. In some regions, they were regarded as monsters. The irony is that much of this fear developed before humans understood what orcas actually were. Because despite their common name, killer whales are not whales in the way most people imagine. They belong to the dolphin family. In fact, they are the largest members of the dolphin family alive today. That alone begins to change the picture. Dolphins are known for intelligence, communication, cooperation, and social complexity. Orcas inherited all of those traits and then pushed them to extraordinary levels. They did not become successful because they were merely powerful. They became successful because they combined power with intelligence throughout the animal kingdom. Strength alone rarely explains long-term dominance. Plenty of animals are strong. Far fewer possess the ability to learn, adapt, teach, and pass information from one generation to the next. Orcas do all of those things. Yet before we dive into their intelligence, it is worth appreciating the scale of the animal itself. A large male orca can reach lengths approaching 10 meters. Some weigh more than 6 tons. Their dorsal fins can rise nearly 2 meters above the surface. Seen from a distance, that fin alone can make an animal look intimidating. Seen up close, the effect is difficult to describe. Divers who have encountered wild orcas often struggle to explain the feeling. It is not simply fear. It is not even awe. It is something closer to realizing that the ocean contains animals operating on a scale different from our own. Every movement appears effortless. Every turn is controlled. Every interaction seems deliberate. Orcas do not move like animals struggling against the water. They move like animals perfectly designed for it. Their black and white coloration, so iconic to humans, serves practical purposes beneath the surface. Their bodies are streamlined for speed and endurance. Their muscles generate extraordinary power. Their senses allow them to perceive information that humans cannot. Every aspect of their anatomy reflects millions of years of evolutionary refinement. And all of that refinement serves one purpose: hunting, because orcas are hunters. In a way few other animals have ever been. They hunt across every ocean on Earth. They hunt in polar seas filled with drifting ice. They hunt in temperate coastal waters. They hunt in the open ocean far beyond the sight of land. Wherever prey exists, orcas have found ways to exploit it. This flexibility is one of the reasons they became so successful. Predators specialize. Some focus on specific prey, others depend on specific habitats. Orcas seem almost allergic to limitation. Different populations have developed entirely different lifestyles. Some feed primarily on fish. Others focus on marine mammals. Some target sharks. Others specialize in seals. Certain populations hunt species that neighboring populations completely ignore. This alone should make us pause, because it hints at something unusual. Most predators are guided heavily by instinct. Orcas appear guided by something more. Researchers who spent decades studying them began noticing patterns that did not fit traditional ideas about animal behavior. Hunting techniques varied from region to region. Diets varied from region to region. Behaviors varied from region to region. It was as if different groups of orcas possessed their own traditions, their own cultures, their own ways of living. Such ideas were once controversial. Today they form one of the most fascinating areas of marine biology, but long before scientists reached those conclusions, people were already witnessing the consequences of orca intelligence. Some of the earliest observations came from sailors. Imagine crossing remote seas long before modern technology. No satellite navigation, no sonar, no radio communication, just wind, water, and uncertainty. In those conditions, encounters with large marine animals left lasting impressions. Sailors watched pods of orcas working together in ways that seemed coordinated. They saw individuals performing different roles during hunts. They watched whales many times larger than the predators pursuing them. These were not random attacks. They were organized efforts. And centuries ago, observers sensed that something unusual was happening. Over time, stories accumulated. Some were exaggerated, some were inaccurate. But many contained a common theme. Orcas appeared intelligent. More intelligent than people expected predators to be. This perception only grew stronger as scientific observation improved. Researchers began documenting behaviors that seemed astonishing: cooperative hunting strategies, long-term family bonds, complex vocal communication, social learning, problem-solving. In some cases, behaviors spread through populations almost like ideas spreading through human communities. Every new discovery made the animal more impressive. Every new discovery made the central mystery harder to explain. Because intelligence changes the equation, predator lacks the ability to distinguish between different opportunities. Then, avoiding humans might be explained by chance. But if that predator is capable of learning, recognizing patterns, and making decisions, Then repeated avoidance begins to look far more deliberate. This is where the story becomes truly fascinating. Humans have entered the water with wild orcas countless times. Some encounters occurred intentionally. Others did not. Divers have found themselves surrounded by pods. Researchers have spent years observing them at close range. Sailors have watched them approach vessels. Swimmers have encountered them unexpectedly. Again and again, the same pattern emerges. The orcas notice the humans. The humans know they have been noticed. And then the animals move on, post. There are moments that seem almost impossible when viewed through the lens of traditional predator behavior. Orcas approaching divers with curiosity. Orcas examining swimmers. Orcas passing close enough for eye contact. Situations where the outcome should feel uncertain, yet somehow does not. Host. This does not mean wild orcas are friendly. That is one of the biggest misconceptions surrounding them. Wild predators are not friends, are not companions. They deserve respect, precisely because of what they are capable of doing. An adult orca could kill a human if it chose to. There is no serious debate about that. Its strength alone makes the discussion unnecessary. The question has never been whether an orca can kill a human. The question is why it almost never chooses to. The distinction matters. One is a question about ability. The other is a question about behavior. And behavior is where the mystery lives. Because everything about the orca points toward effectiveness. Everything about the animal points toward competence. Think about its evolutionary history points toward a predator capable of making decisions with remarkable precision, which means that every time an orca encounters a human and decides not to attack, that decision becomes part of a much larger puzzle that stretches across oceans, generations, cultures, and decades of scientific observation. And the deeper researchers looked into the lives of these animals, the more they began to realize that understanding this mystery would require understanding something even bigger than predation itself. Because before we can answer why humans appear to be different, we first need to understand what kind of predator an orca actually is. And once you see what these animals are capable of accomplishing in the wild, the question becomes far more difficult to ignore. After all, if an animal can hunt great white sharks and whales, why are humans the exception? To understand why this question has puzzled scientists for decades, it helps to appreciate the kind of animal we are dealing with. Many predators inspire fear because they possess one extraordinary advantage. Some are fast, some are strong, some are heavily armed, some rely on stealth. Orcas possess all of those advantages at once. They are among the rare animals on Earth that seem almost unfairly equipped for survival. Everything about them suggests effectiveness. Everything about them suggests control, and nowhere is that more obvious than when you begin looking at what an orca can actually do. The first thing people notice is usually their size. Large male orca can approach 10 meters in length and weigh more than 6 tons. Numbers alone rarely communicate scale properly. 6-ton animal sounds impressive on paper, but standing beside one would feel very different. Imagine a fully grown pickup truck suddenly becoming alive, intelligent, and capable of moving through water with complete grace. That comparison still fails to capture the reality. Orcas do not merely appear large, they possess presence. Marine biologists, who have spent entire careers studying them, often describe the feeling of seeing a large male surface nearby as something that never loses its impact. The dorsal fin rises first, tall, black, and perfectly vertical. Then the back appears. Then the rest of the animal follows. Every movement feels controlled. Every movement feels intentional. Unlike many large animals that seem burdened by their own size, orcas appear to wear their size effortlessly. This becomes even more remarkable once they begin moving. Water is a difficult environment, resists movement constantly. Every predator living within it must overcome that resistance. Orcas do so with astonishing efficiency. They can exceed speeds of 50 kilometers per hour when necessary. They can accelerate rapidly. They can change direction with precision. They can travel extraordinary distances over the course of a single day. Some populations routinely move hundreds of kilometers while searching for food. Others undertake journeys that span entire regions. Endurance matters just as much as speed. A predator may be capable of a short burst of power, but maintaining effectiveness across long periods requires something different. Orcas possess both. They can explode into action when an opportunity presents itself, then continue traveling through the ocean long after other predators would begin, conserving energy. This combination of strength and endurance helps explain why they became such successful hunters. Yet physical power alone does not place an animal at the top of a food chain. The ocean contains many large animals. It contains many fast animals. Orcas became something more because of the tools nature equipped them with. Consider their teeth. An adult orca can possess more than 40 large conical teeth, designed not for chewing, but for gripping and tearing. Each tooth can exceed 10 centimeters in length. They are built to hold struggling prey securely, whether that prey is a fish, a seal, a shark, or even another marine mammal. The objective remains the same. Once the grip is established, escape becomes extremely difficult. Unlike certain predators that rely on a single killing bite, orcas often use force, teamwork, and control. Teeth are part of a much larger system rather than the sole weapon. The real weapon may be their brain. This becomes obvious when observing how they gather information. Humans experience the world primarily through sight. Orcas experience a world shaped heavily by sound. Sound travels through water far more effectively than through air. What appears invisible to us may be perfectly clear to them. Using echolocation, an orca can produce clicks that travel through the ocean, bounce off objects, and return with information. The echoes reveal shapes, distances, movements, and structures hidden from view. Imagine being able to perceive your surroundings even in complete darkness. Imagine being able to detect a fish concealed beneath the surface, or identify objects beyond visual range. That ability transforms the way an animal interacts with its environment. Researchers often describe echolocation as a form of biological sonar. The comparison is useful, but it may actually undersell the complexity involved. Orcas do not simply receive information, they interpret it. Every sound becomes part of a constantly updating picture of the world around them. In some environments, visibility may be limited, water may be cloudy, light may be poor. Yet the orca continues operating effectively because it is not dependent on sight alone. The ocean speaks through echoes, and few animals are better equipped to listen. This sensory advantage becomes even more powerful when combined with social cooperation. One of the defining characteristics of an orca is that it rarely lives alone. Most individuals spend their lives surrounded by family members, travel together, hunt together, communicate together, learn together. Entire lives unfold within social groups. Consequences of this arrangement are enormous. A solitary predator relies entirely on its own experience. Social predator can benefit from the experience of many individuals at once. Knowledge accumulates. Skills accumulate. Strategies improve. Imagine a pod searching for prey. Multiple animals contribute information. Multiple animals participate in decisions. Multiple animals coordinate movement. The result is not merely a collection of hunters. It is a hunting team. This distinction helps explain some of the extraordinary behaviors observed in wild populations. In Antarctica, researchers have documented orcas creating waves to wash seals from floating ice. The behavior requires coordination. Individuals position themselves carefully. Timing matters. Execution matters. The technique succeeds because multiple animals work together toward a common objective. Elsewhere, orcas have been observed intentionally stranding themselves on beaches to capture sea lions before wriggling back into deeper water. Such behavior involves risk. Misjudge the attempt, and the consequences could be fatal. Yet, some populations perform it repeatedly with remarkable success. The ability to develop and refine such strategies reveals something important. These animals are not relying solely on instinct. They are adapting, they are learning, they are innovating, and they are teaching those innovations to younger generations. Another reason orcas dominate marine ecosystems is their extraordinary adaptability. Few predators can match the range of environments they occupy. They are found in every ocean on Earth. They move through tropical waters, thrive in temperate regions. They hunt beneath Arctic ice. They patrol Antarctic seas. From a biological perspective, this distribution is astonishing. Most large predators have limitations. Climate restricts them. Habitat restricts them. Prey availability restricts them. Orcas seem unusually capable of overcoming those restrictions. Wherever suitable food exists, they often find a way to exploit it. Their presence across the globe has created an unusual situation. There is almost no marine environment where the possibility of encountering an orca can be completely ruled out. This global reach reinforces their position at the top of the food chain. Apex predators influence ecosystems not merely through direct predation, but through presence. Other animals alter behavior in response to them. Migration routes change. Feeding patterns change. Risk calculations change. The effect can ripple through entire ecosystems. In some regions, sharks abandon areas when orcas appear. In others, marine mammals become more cautious. Predator does not need to attack constantly to exert influence. Its existence alone changes the behavior of everything around it. This level of ecological power is rare. Yet, perhaps the clearest evidence of orca dominance comes from what does not hunt them. Adult orcas have no consistent natural predator. Young calves face risks. Illness can occur. Injuries happen. But healthy adults occupy a position few animals ever reach. They are not spending their lives looking over their shoulders. They are not adapting to avoid a larger hunter. They are the larger hunter. This status changes the way evolution shapes behavior. Animals, facing constant predation pressure, often develop strategies focused on avoidance and survival. Orcas evolved within a different reality. Their challenges became centered around finding food, navigating social relationships, and raising offspring. The absence of regular predators allowed other traits to flourish. Intelligence flourished. Social complexity flourished. Cultural transmission flourished. Over millions of years, these developments produced an animal unlike any other predator in the ocean, and perhaps unlike any other predator on Earth. Yet none of these qualities fully explain the mystery that brought us here. In fact, they deepen it, because every new fact about an orca seems to create another reason why humans should be vulnerable. The animal is large enough, strong enough, fast enough, intelligent enough, equipped enough. It possesses the senses, the tools, and the opportunity. It encounters humans. It notices humans. adapts. It understands its environment with remarkable sophistication, and still the pattern remains unchanged. The question becomes harder to ignore with every detail. Because when an animal sits at the very top of the ocean, when it possesses virtually every advantage a predator could want, and when it repeatedly encounters a creature as vulnerable as a human in open water, the absence of attacks begins to feel less like an accident and more like a clue. And the deeper scientists looked into the lives of these animals, the more they realized that the answer might not lie in their strength at all. It might lie in something far more surprising. Strength explains how an animal survives. Intelligence explains how an animal adapts, but neither fully explains why different groups of orcas can live in the same ocean and behave as though they belong to entirely different worlds. This is where the story of the killer whale becomes far more unusual than most people realize, because when scientists first began studying orcas seriously, they assumed they were looking at a single species with a broadly similar lifestyle. That assumption seemed reasonable. After all, a lion in one part of Africa still behaves like a lion elsewhere. Wolves may adapt to local conditions, but a wolf remains recognizable as a wolf. Orcas appeared no different. Yet, as the years passed and observations accumulated, researchers began noticing patterns that refused to fit that simple picture. Along the Pacific coast of North America, some orcas spent their lives chasing salmon. Their movements followed fish runs. Their social groups remained stable. Behavior seemed predictable. Not far away, another group of orcas occupied the same waters but lived entirely differently. These animals hunted seals, sea lions, dolphins, and other marine mammals. They traveled differently. They communicated differently. They even behaved differently around one another. The strangest part was that the two groups rarely mixed. They could cross paths in the same ocean and continue on their way as though they belonged to separate societies. Scientists eventually realized they were not simply observing animals with different diets. They were observing cultures. Culture is a word most people reserve for humans. It evokes images of languages, traditions, customs, and inherited knowledge. Yet the more researchers studied certain animal species, the harder it became to avoid the conclusion that culture exists elsewhere in nature. Orcas became one of the strongest examples. Unlike instinct, culture is learned. It passes from one generation to the next through observation, imitation, and experience. It allows groups to develop traditions that cannot be explained solely by genetics. In other words, two populations may be physically capable of doing the same thing, yet choose completely different ways of living, because they inherited different knowledge. For an apex predator, this is extraordinary. Imagine two neighbouring communities. Both have access to the same resources, possess the same physical abilities. Yet each develops its own customs, its own behaviours, its own identity. That is remarkably similar to what researchers began seeing in orcas. Some populations became specialists in fish, others became specialists in marine mammals. Some hunted in silence, others vocalized frequently. Some traveled in large family groups, others formed smaller, looser associations. These differences persisted across generations. Calves learned them from adults. Adults reinforced them throughout life. The result was something that looked less like instinctive animal behavior and more like inherited tradition. One of the most fascinating discoveries involved communication. Orcas are highly vocal animals. Beneath the surface, pods produce whistles, clicks, pulsed calls that serve different purposes. To human ears, these sounds can seem mysterious or even alien. To orcas, they are part of daily life. Pod possesses a distinct acoustic identity. Researchers studying certain populations discovered that family groups shared unique call patterns, functioned almost like dialects. Calves learned these vocal traditions from relatives. As they grew, they continued using the same acoustic signatures. Entire family lines could be identified by the sounds they made. The implications were astonishing. Language is often considered one of humanity's defining characteristics. Orcas do not possess language in the human sense, but they demonstrate something remarkably similar. Socially learned communication passed across generations. Some scientists have spent decades recording and cataloguing these calls. They can recognize specific families based solely on sound. Imagine being able to identify a human family by hearing them speak from a distance. Now imagine that tradition continuing for generations in the open ocean. This acoustic world forms the foundation of Orca society. Sound allows individuals to remain connected even when separated by distance or poor visibility. It allows families to coordinate movement. It allows mothers to communicate with calves. It allows entire pods to maintain cohesion while navigating vast stretches of water. To an orca, the ocean is not silent. It is filled with familiar voices. This social complexity helps explain another remarkable aspect of their lives: family bonds. Few large predators maintain relationships as strong or as long-lasting as those seen in orcas. Calf may spend its entire life within its mother's family group. Sons often remain with their mothers for decades. Daughters frequently stay as well, raising their own offspring within the same extended family. Some matriarchs lead families for generations. Their knowledge becomes invaluable. They remember feeding grounds. They remember migration routes. They remember solutions to challenges that younger animals have never encountered. In difficult years, this knowledge can mean the difference between survival and starvation. One famous study involving resident orcas in the Pacific Northwest revealed that older females play a crucial role in the success of their families. After they stop reproducing, continue contributing through leadership and experience. In many ways, they function as living libraries. Their value lies not in physical strength, but in accumulated knowledge. This realization transformed how scientists viewed Orca society. Post. These were not loose collections of animals drifting together temporarily. They were communities built around memory, communities built around relationships, communities built around shared experience. Such complexity changes how we think about intelligence. Intelligence is often measured through problem-solving tasks conducted in controlled environments. Yet some forms of intelligence reveal themselves through social organization. Maintaining lifelong relationships requires recognition. Communication requires recognition. Teaching requires recognition. Coordinating group behavior requires recognition. Orcas demonstrate all of these abilities repeatedly. Their lives unfold within networks of social connections that can endure for decades. The consequences become visible everywhere. Researchers look. A calf does not simply learn how to swim. It learns how its family lives. It learns where to travel. It learns which sounds belong to its group. It learns what food is appropriate. It learns what behaviors matter. Process resembles education more than instinct. The idea becomes even more fascinating when examining feeding habits. Consider two populations occupying neighboring regions. Both encounter similar prey. Both possess the physical ability to hunt a variety of animals. Yet one population focuses almost entirely on fish, while the other concentrates on marine mammals. Scientists have observed situations where fish-eating orcas ignored prey that mammal-hunting orcas would eagerly pursue. Difference cannot be explained by capability. It can only be explained by learned behavior. In essence, these animals inherit dietary traditions. They grow up within specific hunting cultures. What counts as food in one community may not count as food in another. This realization has profound implications for the mystery surrounding humans. Predators are often imagined as opportunists willing to attack anything vulnerable. Orcas challenge that assumption. They appear highly selective. Their choices are shaped not merely by hunger, but by tradition. Not merely by instinct, but by knowledge. A young orca born into a fish-eating population does not automatically begin hunting seals simply because seals exist nearby. It learns what its family teaches. It inherits a worldview shaped by generations of experience. Viewed through that lens, the ocean begins to look very different. It is no longer populated by a single type of killer whale. Instead, it contains multiple societies, each carrying its own traditions through time. Different histories, different behaviors, different priorities, different ways of interacting with the world. In some respects, the term orca starts to feel almost misleading because it hides this extraordinary diversity beneath a single name. And perhaps that diversity explains why scientists became increasingly fascinated by the question of human safety. Because once culture enters the picture, behavior becomes more than biology. It becomes inheritance. It becomes education. It becomes identity. An animal may be physically capable of hunting something, and yet never consider it prey, because it was never taught to do so. The implications are enormous, especially when we remember that wild orcas encounter orcas across oceans all over the planet. These animals truly inherit their understanding of the world from one generation to the next. Then the absence of humans from their hunting traditions becomes difficult to ignore. It suggests that somewhere deep within these societies, knowledge has been passed along for generations. Knowledge that influences decisions every single day. Nowhere does that inherited knowledge become more visible than in the way young orcas learn from the families around them. And nowhere does that inherited knowledge become more visible than in the way young orcas learn from the families around them. A newborn orca enters the world without understanding the ocean it has been born into. It does not know where food can be found. It does not know which sounds belong to its family. It does not know the routes its pod will travel, the dangers it may face, the techniques that have allowed its relatives to survive for generations. Like any young animal, it arrives dependent on others. But unlike many animals, an orca will remain connected to those teachers for an astonishing portion of its life. Bond between a mother and her calf begins immediately. During the first days after birth, the calf stays close to its mother, often swimming in a position known as the slipstream, where the mother's movement helps pull the calf through the water with less effort. This allows the newborn to conserve energy while its muscles strengthen and its coordination improves. At first glance, it seems like a simple biological adaptation. In reality, it marks the beginning of a relationship that may last for decades. Researchers studying wild populations have documented sons remaining with their mothers throughout their entire lives. Daughters often do the same, eventually raising calves of their own within the same extended family group. This creates something rare among large predators: social structure built around continuity. Knowledge does not disappear when one generation reaches adulthood. Instead, it remains within the family, accumulating over time. Every year of experience becomes part of a living archive passed to younger animals. In many ways, an orca calf spends its early life in what resembles a floating classroom. The lessons begin long before hunting. The calf learns how to communicate. It learns how to recognize the voices of relatives. It learns how to travel efficiently. It learns social rules, relationships, behaviors that researchers are still trying to fully understand. As it grows, these lessons become more sophisticated. The young animal begins paying attention to feeding behavior. It watches adults. It follows them. It observes details that may appear insignificant to a human observer, but carry enormous importance in the life of an orca. Over time, observation turns into participation. Participation turns into experience. Experience becomes knowledge. One of the most remarkable aspects of this process is that it is not uniform across the species. Calf, born into a fish-eating population, inherits a completely different education than one born into a population that hunts marine mammals. The oceans around them may look similar. Their bodies may be nearly identical, yet the lessons they receive are profoundly different. This distinction is one of the strongest pieces of evidence that culture exists among orcas. If behavior were entirely instinctive, such dramatic differences would be difficult to explain. Instead, young animals appear to learn from the examples around them. They inherit traditions. They inherit preferences. They inherit strategies. They inherit an understanding of what counts as food. Consider a young resident orca in the Pacific Northwest. Much of its life revolves around salmon. It watches adults locate fish. It learns migration routes. It learns seasonal patterns. It learns the behaviors that have allowed its pod to survive for generations. Young transient orca growing up nearby receives a completely different education. Instead of salmon, it learns to pursue seals, sea lions, dolphins, and other marine mammals. It learns stealth. It learns patience. It learns how to approach prey without revealing its presence. Two young animals, two entirely different worlds. This educational process reaches its most dramatic expression in the hunting techniques unique to specific populations. Some of these behaviors are so specialized that scientists believe they could not have emerged without generations of refinement. In Antarctica, pods have been observed creating waves to knock seals from floating ice. The technique appears almost engineered. Several individuals position themselves carefully before accelerating in unison. The resulting wave surges over the ice and sweeps the seal into the water. The precision required is extraordinary. Timing matters. Coordination matters. Experience matters. Young orcas do not simply wake up one day knowing how to perform such a maneuver. They learn it. They practice it. They observe adults. Over time, they become participants themselves. Elsewhere, along parts of South America's coastline, certain orcas intentionally beach themselves to capture sea lions resting near shore. The maneuver is among the most dangerous hunting techniques known in marine mammals. Miscalculate the approach, and an animal can become stranded, yet some populations perform it repeatedly. Calves growing up in these communities spend years watching experienced adults execute the behavior. Gradually they attempt it themselves under increasingly challenging conditions. What emerges is not instinct alone. It is apprenticeship. The same pattern appears throughout the world. Different populations possess different specialties. Different specialties require different forms of knowledge. That knowledge must be transmitted somehow. The most obvious explanation is teaching through example. For decades, scientists debated whether non-human animals truly teach. The term carried significant weight, because teaching implies more than simple observation. It suggests that experienced individuals actively influence the learning of younger ones. Increasingly, evidence from Orcas points in that direction. Adults sometimes share prey with younger members of the pod. They modify their behavior around calves. They create opportunities for learning. Process may not resemble a human classroom, but the outcome serves a similar purpose. Information moves from one generation to the next. Perhaps the most important figures within this system are the older females. Among humans, grandparents often serve as repositories of family history. They remember events younger generations never experienced. They preserve knowledge that might otherwise disappear. Orca societies appear to function in a surprisingly similar way. Studies have shown that older females often play critical leadership roles, particularly during difficult periods when food becomes scarce. Their experience helps guide the group. Their memory helps locate resources. Their decisions influence survival. Some researchers have suggested that the evolutionary success of menopause in orcas may be linked to this role, instead of continuing reproduction indefinitely. Older females contribute through leadership and accumulated knowledge. In practical terms, this means a grandmother can help ensure the survival of children and grandchildren long after she stops producing offspring herself. Few discoveries have changed our understanding of orcas more profoundly than this one. It revealed a society built not merely around reproduction, but around information. Information becomes a resource. Information becomes inheritance. Information becomes survival. Once that perspective takes hold, many mysteries begin looking different. The question of prey selection becomes especially interesting. Predators are often imagined as opportunists. The assumption is simple. If an animal can catch something and eat it, it probably will. Orcas repeatedly challenge this assumption. Entire populations ignore prey that would appear perfectly suitable from a nutritional perspective. Fish-eating orcas may pass seals without attacking them. Mammal-eating populations may ignore fish species available in abundance. The behavior makes little sense if prey selection is purely instinctive. It makes much more sense if prey selection is culturally inherited, post. In other words, young orcas learn what food is by watching the animals around them. This idea has enormous implications for the mystery surrounding humans, because humans are encountered regularly. Orcas see boats, they see divers, they see swimmers, they hear engines, they investigate unfamiliar objects. They are clearly aware of our presence, yet awareness alone does not determine behavior. An animal can recognize something without viewing it as prey. Calf, growing up within a pod, inherits a worldview shaped by generations of experience. It learns which animals are hunted. It learns which animals are ignored. It learns how its community interacts with the world. Pulse. If humans have never occupied the role of prey within that inherited tradition, then each new generation enters the ocean carrying that same assumption forward. Possibility is fascinating because it shifts the question entirely. Instead of asking why orcas choose not to hunt humans, we begin asking whether hunting humans was ever part of their cultural history in the first place. The answer may lie buried in countless generations of social learning. Every calf watching its mother, every young animal observing older relatives, every lesson repeated over decades and centuries. Over time, these lessons become so deeply embedded that they appear almost instinctive, yet beneath the surface lies culture. Beneath the surface lies inheritance. Beneath the surface lies a chain of knowledge stretching back farther than any scientist can trace. And when that inherited knowledge is combined with some of the most sophisticated hunting strategies ever observed in the animal kingdom. Picture becomes even more remarkable. And when that inherited knowledge is combined with some of the most sophisticated hunting strategies ever observed in the animal kingdom, the picture becomes even more remarkable. Because understanding what orcas learn is only half of the story. The other half is seeing what they do with that knowledge. There are predators that rely on surprise. There are predators that rely on speed. There are predators that rely on brute force. Orcas seem capable of using all three, but what truly separates them from almost every other hunter in the ocean is their ability to adapt a strategy to a situation. They do not simply chase prey. They solve problems. Sometimes those problems involve geography. Sometimes they involve weather. Sometimes they involve the behavior of another intelligent animal trying desperately not to become a meal. One of the most famous examples takes place in the freezing waters of Antarctica. Here, seals often rest on floating ice, using the platforms as temporary islands of safety. For most predators, reaching them would be nearly impossible. The ice creates a barrier. The seal remains out of reach. The hunt ends before it begins. But certain Antarctic orcas approach the challenge differently. Researchers observing these hunts have witnessed behavior so coordinated in NAID that it initially seemed difficult to believe. Several orcas position themselves side by side and begin swimming toward the ice. Their movements are synchronized. Their speed increases together. They surge forward. They generate a powerful wave that rolls beneath the ice floe. Water rushes across the surface. The seal loses its footing. Suddenly its island disappears beneath a wall of moving water, and the animal tumbles into the sea. What makes this behavior extraordinary is not merely the outcome, it is the planning involved. A single orca cannot reliably create the effect. The wave requires cooperation. Every participant must contribute. Timing must be precise. The angle of approach matters. The speed matters. The execution matters. It is difficult to watch such a hunt without seeing intelligence at work. The animals are not reacting impulsively. They are applying a learned solution to a recurring problem. The first time scientists documented this behavior challenged traditional assumptions about predator intelligence. The more it was studied, the more impressive it became. Young orcas observe these hunts long before participating in them. They learn through repetition. They learn through experience. The technique becomes part of their culture. Somewhere in the distant past, an individual or group discovered the strategy. Generations later, descendants continue using it. The lesson survives. This pattern appears again and again throughout the orca world, along parts of Patagonia's coastline. Another population developed a hunting technique that is every bit as dramatic. Here, sea lion pups gather near beaches. For most marine predators, the shallow water close to shore creates a problem. Too far onto land, and escape becomes difficult. Yet some orcas intentionally do exactly that. They launch themselves toward the beach, sliding partially out of the water in pursuit of prey. The maneuver is astonishingly risky. A mistake can be fatal. Becoming stranded means death, yet experienced individuals perform it with remarkable control. Researchers have watched mothers teach younger animals how to execute the technique. First, the calves remain cautious. They observe, they follow. Gradually, they begin attempting smaller versions of the behavior. Over time, skill replaces uncertainty. Once again, knowledge passes from one generation to the next. What emerges is not a simple predator-prey interaction, but a tradition. And like many traditions, it only exists in specific places because specific communities preserve it. Elsewhere, different populations developed different solutions. Some became masters of open water pursuit. Some specialized in targeting particular species. Some learned how to exploit weaknesses that other predators never discovered. The variety is extraordinary. It reflects not only intelligence but flexibility. Flexibility is one of the most valuable traits any predator can possess. Prey changes, environments change, conditions change. An animal capable of adapting maintains an advantage even when circumstances become difficult. Orcas demonstrate this repeatedly. Consider what happens when they target marine mammals. Unlike fish, marine mammals often possess high intelligence themselves. They understand danger, they recognize predators, they fight back. Successful hunting requires more than speed. It requires strategy. In many documented hunts, orcas work together to isolate individuals from larger groups. Separation becomes the goal. A seal surrounded by companions may detect danger sooner. Whale protected by adults may be harder to attack. Remove those advantages, and the situation changes dramatically. Researchers studying whale hunts have observed pods coordinating in ways that appear remarkably sophisticated. Some individuals pursue, others block escape routes. Others position themselves strategically. Each participant contributes to a larger effort. The hunt becomes less like a chaotic chase and more like a carefully managed operation. This cooperative behavior reveals another important truth. Orcas do not hunt as isolated individuals whenever circumstances become challenging. They hunt as members of a team. Teams create opportunities that solitary predators cannot. Teams create options. The result is a predator capable of tackling prey far larger than itself. Throughout the natural world, size often determines outcomes. Bigger animals usually possess advantages. Orcas repeatedly challenge that rule. By working together, they can target animals that would overwhelm a lone hunter. This is one reason they became such influential predators across marine ecosystems. Their strength is multiplied by coordination. Their intelligence is multiplied by communication. Their effectiveness is multiplied by cooperation. Communication plays a crucial role throughout these events. Scientists continue studying exactly how orcas coordinate during hunts, but it is clear that sound is fundamental. Different populations even adjust their vocal behavior depending on prey type. Mammal-hunting orcas, for example, often become quieter during certain stages of a hunt. The reason is straightforward. Marine mammals can hear them. Silence reduces the risk of detection. This level of behavioral adjustment demonstrates awareness. Predators understand that sound influences outcomes. They alter their actions accordingly. It is another example of problem-solving in action. One of the most fascinating aspects of orca hunting is that success does not always depend on overwhelming force. Sometimes it depends on patience. There are documented cases where pods followed prey for extended periods, gradually exhausting it. Rather than relying on a sudden burst of violence, they exploited endurance and persistence. The strategy resembles those used by certain terrestrial predators, yet it unfolds in an entirely different environment. The ocean provides few places to hide. Eventually, fatigue becomes a factor. Eventually, mistakes occur. The orcas wait for those moments. Such behavior requires discipline. It requires judgment. It requires an understanding of effort versus reward. All of these qualities point toward a predator making decisions rather than simply reacting to instinct. This is perhaps the most important takeaway from every remarkable hunting story. Whether they are creating waves, beaching themselves intentionally, coordinating attacks, or adjusting communication patterns, Orcas behave like animals capable of evaluating situations and selecting appropriate responses. They are not following a rigid script written by evolution. They are applying knowledge. They are responding to circumstances. They are solving problems. The cumulative effect is difficult to ignore. Every observed strategy adds another layer to our understanding of these animals. Every documented hunt reveals a little more about the sophistication of their behavior. Every discovery creates a larger challenge for anyone attempting to explain their relationship with humans. Because if orcas possess this level of awareness, if they can distinguish between prey types, if they can modify tactics according to context, then their repeated interactions with humans become even more meaningful. It becomes harder to dismiss those encounters as coincidence, harder to attribute them to simple misunderstanding, harder to believe that one of the most accomplished predators on Earth somehow fails to recognize opportunity when it sees it. The evidence points in another direction. It points toward choice. It points toward recognition. Points toward an animal that understands its environment with extraordinary sophistication. And perhaps most importantly, points toward an animal that knows exactly what it is doing. Perhaps most importantly, it points toward an animal that knows exactly what it is doing. That realization can sometimes create a misleading impression. The more we learn about orcas, the easier it becomes to imagine them as invincible. They seem larger than life. They dominate the stories told about them. They sit at the top of marine food webs. They hunt animals that most predators would never dare challenge. Yet even apex predators do not live free from pressure. The ocean is not divided into winners and losers. It is a world of constant challenges, where survival depends not only on strength, but on adaptation. Orcas may occupy one of the highest positions in that world, mercars, but they are still participants in it. Their lives are shaped by risk, uncertainty, competition, and change. The difference is that the challenges they face are often less obvious than those faced by smaller animals. Greatest dangers rarely come from a larger predator waiting in the shadows. More often they come from the environment itself. They come from scarcity. They come from mistakes. They come from a changing ocean. And sometimes they come from each other. The most vulnerable period in an orca's life begins shortly after birth. For all the power an adult possesses, newborn calf enters the world fragile and dependent. The first months are particularly dangerous. Calves must grow quickly. They must learn to travel with the pod. They must remain close to their mothers. A young orca cannot rely on strength. It relies on protection. This is one reason family bonds are so important. A calf is rarely alone. Mothers remain attentive. Other relatives often stay nearby. The group itself becomes a form of security. Even so, survival is not guaranteed. Harsh environmental conditions, disease, nutritional stress, other factors can all threaten young animals. Researchers studying various populations have found that calf mortality can fluctuate significantly, depending on food availability and environmental conditions. When prey becomes scarce, the youngest members of the pod often suffer first. The image of the unstoppable predator begins to look more complicated. Beneath the surface exists a reality familiar to all wildlife. Survival depends on resources. Without resources, even the most capable hunters face difficulty. Food shortages have become an increasingly important concern in some regions. Resident orca populations that depend heavily on salmon provide one of the clearest examples. When salmon numbers decline, the consequences ripple throughout the community. Mothers may struggle to obtain sufficient nutrition. Calves may receive less energy during critical stages of development. Social dynamics can be affected. Reproductive success can decline. Challenge is not unique to orcas. It affects countless species around the world. Cost. Yet, seeing it occur in one of the ocean's top predators serves as a reminder that dominance does not mean immunity. Even an apex predator remains connected to the health of its ecosystem. If the ecosystem changes, the predator changes with it. Catch. Some of the most fascinating evidence of this relationship comes from older females. Researchers have observed that experienced matriarchs often become particularly important during difficult years. Their knowledge of feeding grounds and migration routes helps the family navigate periods of scarcity. They remember places younger animals have never visited. They remember patterns established long before the current generation was born. In some situations, the survival of the group appears closely linked to the presence of these knowledgeable leaders. Once again, information becomes a resource. Memory becomes a resource. Experience becomes a resource. These are not qualities typically associated with predators, yet they are central to understanding how orcas survive. Competition also shapes their lives. Not every challenge comes from prey availability. Orcas frequently encounter other groups of orcas. These interactions can range from neutral to highly complex. Different populations often avoid one another. Different hunting cultures sometimes occupy overlapping regions while maintaining distinct identities. Researchers continue studying the details of these relationships, but it is clear that social boundaries exist. The ocean may be vast, yet it contains invisible divisions created by culture, behavior, and tradition. In some cases, competition for resources influences how groups interact. In others, differences appear rooted in long-standing social separation. The result is a world far more intricate than the simplistic image of a lone predator roaming freely through the sea. Every pod exists within a network of relationships. Every decision occurs within a broader ecological context. Another challenge comes from an unexpected source: sound. Human beings often think of pollution in visible terms: plastic, oil, waste, yet noise can be equally disruptive. For animals that depend heavily on acoustic communication, sound is essential. Orcas use it to navigate, coordinate, maintain social bonds, and locate prey. Their world is built around hearing. Imagine trying to hold a conversation in a room filled with constant machinery. Imagine attempting to locate family members through a wall of competing noise. This is increasingly becoming reality in parts of the ocean. Shipping traffic has expanded dramatically over the past century. Large vessels generate low-frequency sounds that can travel enormous distances underwater. Industrial activity contributes additional noise. Military sonar systems introduce yet another source of disturbance. For humans, these sounds may go unnoticed. For orcas, they become part of the environment. Scientists have documented behavioral changes associated with elevated noise levels. Communication patterns shift. Hunting efficiency may decline. Stress levels may increase. Once again, the image of the invulnerable predator begins to fade. Orcas remain powerful, but they are not separate from the world around them. They are influenced by it. Human activity affects them in other ways as well. Pollution can accumulate within marine food chains. Because orcas sit near the top of those chains, contaminants may become concentrated within their bodies over time. Habitat changes influence prey distribution. Climate shifts alter ecosystems. Fisheries impact food availability. The consequences are often subtle. No single event dramatically transforms an orca population overnight. Instead, pressures accumulate gradually. The ocean changes. the animals respond. This process is unfolding right now across multiple regions of the world. Some populations appear relatively stable. Others face significant challenges. The story varies depending on location, yet the broader lesson remains consistent. Even apex predators exist within systems larger than themselves. They may influence those systems, they do not control them. Perhaps the most revealing aspect of all this is the way orcas respond to change. Rather than relying solely on instinct, they often display flexibility. They adjust behavior. They explore new opportunities. They learn. This adaptability may be one of the reasons they have survived so successfully across such diverse environments. It may also explain why they continue attracting scientific attention. Every new challenge provides another opportunity to observe how intelligence functions in the wild. Every environmental pressure becomes a test of resilience, and resilience is something orcas possess in abundance. Yet resilience should never be mistaken for indifference. Orcas notice changes, they notice disturbances, they notice activity around them. Researchers have repeatedly documented curiosity toward unfamiliar objects, vessels, and events. Sometimes that curiosity appears playful. Sometimes it appears investigative. Sometimes it remains difficult to interpret. What is clear is that these animals pay attention. They gather information, they observe, they remember. The ocean is not merely a backdrop through which they travel. It is a constantly changing landscape filled with signals. And among those signals is us. Human beings have become an increasingly visible presence in marine environments. Boats cross migration routes, divers enter habitats, fishing operations alter ecosystems. Noise travels through the water. Everywhere orcas live, evidence of humanity exists in one form or another. The remarkable thing is not that they notice us. The remarkable thing is how consistently they choose to respond, because after everything we have seen, their intelligence, their adaptability, their awareness, their ability to solve problems and learn from experience, it becomes impossible to argue that humans pass unnoticed through their world. Orcas know we are there. They hear us, they see us, they investigate us, they adjust to our presence. They may not fear us as prey, but they clearly pay attention to us. Orcas may not fear us as prey, but they clearly pay attention to us. That distinction becomes increasingly important once we leave theories behind, begin looking at actual encounters. Because no amount of speculation can compete with real moments when humans and wild orcas found themselves face to face in the same water. These encounters are the closest thing we have to evidence. They are the moments where every advantage belongs to the orca. The moments where a decision could be made. The moments where, if humans truly occupied the role of prey, we might expect the pattern to reveal itself. Yet what makes these stories so fascinating is not what happens. It is what fails to happen. Across decades of observations, expeditions, accidents, unexpected meetings, the same strange theme keeps emerging. Again and again, humans enter the world of the orca, and again, the outcome refuses to match what we might expect from one of the ocean's most capable predators. Some of the most remarkable accounts come from divers. To understand why these encounters matter, imagine the situation from the diver's perspective. In open water, a human is poorly equipped compared to almost every large marine animal. Movement is slower, vision is limited, endurance is reduced. Even experienced divers understand that the ocean is not their natural environment. If an orca wanted to investigate, avoid, or overpower a diver, it could do so with ease. Yet, many divers who have spent time around wild orcas describe experiences that feel surprisingly similar. There is often a moment when the animal notices them. Sometimes it approaches, Sometimes it circles. Sometimes it simply glides past. Witnesses frequently describe a feeling of being observed rather than hunted. One diver working in Arctic waters recalled watching a pod move through clear water beneath him. The animals were close enough to see details in their skin, close enough to recognize individuals. One large female altered her path slightly and approached before passing underneath. For several seconds, the diver found himself looking directly into the eye of an animal weighing several tons. Then the orca continued on its way. The encounter ended almost as quietly as it began. Similar stories emerge from different oceans and different decades. The details change, pattern does not. Researchers studying wild populations often experience something comparable. Unlike tourists or recreational divers, scientists spend years around these animals. They accumulate thousands of hours of observation. They see behavior under a wide range of conditions. If humans truly represented prey, researchers would likely be among the first to recognize it. Instead, many report a very different impression. Curiosity appears frequently. Aggression does not. Some scientists describe young orcas approaching boats with what seems like investigative interest. Others have watched pods alter course briefly before resuming their original direction. In some cases, individuals appear interested in unfamiliar objects, equipment, or activity occurring nearby. Important detail is that these investigations rarely resemble hunting behavior. The distinction matters because predators and curious animals often behave differently. So predators focus. They commit attention toward a target. Their actions serve a clear purpose. Curiosity, by contrast, can appear exploratory. An animal gathers information without escalating the interaction. Much of the evidence from wild orca encounters falls into this second category. The animals seem aware. They seem interested. They do not seem predatory. One of the most famous examples occurred in Norway, where divers regularly enter the water alongside herring-feeding orcas. Under the right conditions, people can find themselves surrounded by multiple animals at once. The scale of such encounters is difficult to exaggerate. Imagine floating in cold northern waters, while several predators larger than automobiles move effortlessly around you. Crows. Every instinct, developed by millions of years of evolution, tells you to be cautious. Yet, thousands of these interactions have occurred without producing the pattern one would expect from a predator, targeting humans as food. This does not mean risk disappears. Any large wild animal deserves respect. A misunderstanding, accidental contact, or unexpected situation can still cause harm. But respect and predation are not the same thing. The distinction becomes clearer when examining cases where humans were particularly vulnerable. Consider shipwreck survivors. Throughout history, sailors have occasionally found themselves stranded at sea. These situations create conditions that seem almost designed to test the question. Humans are exhausted, isolated, exposed, floating in the water for extended periods. If vulnerability alone triggered attacks, such incidents should provide evidence. Yet historical accounts involving wild orcas consistently fail to reveal a pattern of predation. In some cases, sailors observed orcas nearby. In others, animals passed through the area, yet the feared attacks never materialized. Similar stories emerge from surfers and swimmers. Most people entering the ocean understand that they share the environment with wildlife. Encounters are possible. In regions where orcas are present, sightings occasionally occur from beaches, surfboards, and small boats. Witnesses often describe excitement mixed with apprehension. After all, they are observing one of the ocean's apex predators. Yet the stories that follow tend to sound remarkably familiar. The orcas approach, the orcas observe, the orcas leave. One reason these encounters attract scientific interest is that they provide opportunities to compare expectation with reality. Popular culture has spent decades portraying large predators as relentless hunters. The reality observed by field researchers is usually far more nuanced. Wild predators conserve energy. They make decisions. They evaluate situations. They do not attack everything they encounter. Orcas seem especially selective. This selectivity becomes even more intriguing when we examine rare incidents that initially appeared concerning. Over the years, there have been a handful of reports involving physical contact between wild orcas and humans. These cases receive attention because they are unusual. When examined carefully, they often reveal ambiguity rather than predation. Some involve curiosity, some involve play, some remain difficult to interpret. What they generally lack is the sustained behavior associated with hunting. The animal does not pursue the human as prey. The interaction does not escalate into feeding behavior. The pattern remains remarkably consistent. Most famous stories often involve moments where an attack could have happened but did not. There are accounts of divers surrounded by multiple Orcas, accounts of swimmers unexpectedly encountering pods, accounts of researchers working in close proximity for years. Again and again, the opportunity existed. Again and again, the expected outcome never arrived. One particularly striking aspect of these reports is the language witnesses use afterward. While descriptions vary, certain themes appear repeatedly. People speak about awareness, they speak about intelligence, speak about feeling, observed. They speak about the sense that the animal understood their presence. This is not scientific proof of anything. Human perceptions can be unreliable. Yet, when similar descriptions emerge across decades and continents, they become difficult to ignore completely. The witnesses are not describing an animal that failed to notice them. They are describing an animal that appeared fully aware of them. This observation aligns closely with everything scientists know about orca cognition. These animals are not operating blindly. They are not reacting automatically to movement in the water. They possess advanced sensory systems, complex social lives, considerable learning abilities. If an orca approaches a human, it almost certainly knows a human is there. That realization may be one of the most important pieces of this entire puzzle, because it removes one of the simplest explanations. Humans are not being ignored because they go unnoticed, they are being noticed. The evidence overwhelmingly suggests that the question then becomes what happens next. What process unfolds inside the mind of an orca during those moments? What information is being evaluated? What comparisons are being made? Why does curiosity so often replace aggression? Why does observation so often replace predation? The consistency of the outcome is what continues to fascinate researchers. Different oceans, different populations, different situations, different decades. Yet the pattern remains stubbornly intact. Human beings enter the water, orcas encounter them. The animals recognize their presence, and somehow the story keeps ending the same way. The deeper we look into these encounters, the harder it becomes to explain them through coincidence alone. Because when a pattern repeats across thousands of interactions, it begins to suggest something more fundamental. Something rooted not in chance, but in how these animals perceive the world around them. Something rooted not in chance, but in how these animals perceive the world around them. Yet at this point in the story, there is an obvious objection that cannot be ignored. In fact, it is probably the first objection many people think of whenever they hear the claim that wild orcas have never intentionally killed a human. Because while the history of wild encounters is remarkably consistent, the history of captive encounters is not. The public knows this, the media knows this, anyone who has followed stories about marine parks over the last several decades knows this. Orcas have killed humans in captivity. Several fatalities have occurred. These incidents were tragic, widely reported, and impossible to dismiss. So how can both things be true at the same time? How can an animal spend decades interacting peacefully with humans in the wild, while also being responsible for fatal incidents in captivity? The answer requires us to examine not only the incidents themselves, but the environments in which they occurred. Because although the animals involved belonged to the same species, the worlds they inhabited could not have been more different. For much of the 20th century, marine parks transformed public perception of orcas. Before widespread wildlife documentaries, many people had never seen a killer whale up close. Captive facilities changed that. Suddenly, audiences could watch enormous black and white predators performs, jumps, carry trainers through the water, interact with humans in ways that seemed impossible. To many visitors, the relationship appeared extraordinary. It looked like cooperation. It looked like trust. It looked, in some cases, it was almost like friendship. Yet beneath the spectacle existed a reality that scientists continue to debate and study. The average wild orca may travel dozens, sometimes hundreds of kilometers in a single day, lives within a complex social structure. It hunts. It explores. It encounters constantly changing environments. It makes decisions, participates in a society built over generations. A captive orca experiences something fundamentally different. No matter how large a facility appears to human visitors, it represents only a tiny fraction of the space available in the wild. Movement becomes restricted. Social structures become altered. Natural behaviors become limited. Life changes in ways that are difficult for humans to fully appreciate because there is no true equivalent in our own experience. Imagine taking one of the most intelligent, socially complex predators on Earth and placing it within an environment where many of the behaviors that shaped its evolution become impossible. Imagine removing the need to hunt, removing long-distance travel, removing cultural traditions passed through generations, removing much of the environmental complexity that normally fills every day. The result is not simply a wild animal living in a smaller space. The result is a fundamentally altered life. This distinction becomes critical when discussing incidents involving aggression. One of the most famous captive orcas was an individual named Tilikum. His story became known around the world following the death of trainer Dawn Broncho in 2010. The tragedy shocked the public and reignited debates about the ethics of keeping large marine mammals in captivity. Yet even before that event, Tilikum had been involved in previous fatal incidents. Understanding why requires understanding the circumstances of his life. Captured as a young animal, transferred between facilities, and exposed to social conditions unlike those found in the wild, Tilikum's existence unfolded within an artificial environment. Researchers and animal behavior experts have spent years examining how captivity influences animals like him. Their conclusions vary in detail, but many agree on a central point: captivity changes behavior. This should not be surprising. Behavior is shaped by environment, an animal from its natural environment, and behavioral changes are inevitable. The question is not whether changes occur. The question is what those changes look like. In some species, they manifest as repetitive actions. In others, they appear as stress responses. In highly intelligent animals, the consequences can become especially complex. Orcas evolved within societies where relationships matter, family bonds matter, communication matters, choice matters. Captivity often disrupts all of those things. Individuals from different populations may be housed together, despite possessing different cultural backgrounds. Social groups change, separation occurs. The stability found in wild family structures disappears. For an animal that normally spends its life surrounded by relatives, such disruption may carry consequences we do not yet fully understand. This context does not excuse tragedy, nor does it diminish the seriousness of fatal incidents. Instead, it helps explain why scientists are careful when comparing captive behavior with wild behavior. The two environments are not interchangeable. A behavior observed under confinement does not automatically represent how an animal behaves in nature. This distinction exists across the animal kingdom. Zoo animals often behave differently from their wild counterparts. Captive predators may develop patterns rarely seen in natural settings. The same principle applies here. Another important distinction involves the difference between aggression and predation. Humans frequently treat these concepts as though they are identical. They are not. Predation involves hunting, involves identifying something as food. Aggression can arise from many different causes: stress, frustration, competition, confusion, fear, social conflict. The motivation matters because it changes how we interpret behavior. Most captive orca incidents do not resemble feeding events. The animals are not attempting to consume humans. Instead, researchers often interpret the behavior through the lens of social dynamics, stress, play behavior, dominance interactions, or other factors unrelated to predation. This may seem like a subtle distinction, but it is essential. The question driving this documentary has never been whether an orca can kill a human. Captive incidents answer that question immediately. Of course it can. An adult orca possesses more than enough strength. The real mystery has always been different. Why do wild orcas appear unwilling to treat humans as prey? Captivity does not solve that mystery. In many ways, it highlights it, because the existence of captive fatalities proves the capability exists. The power exists. The physical ability exists. What remains absent is the pattern of predation in the wild. If wild orcas regularly viewed humans as food, we would expect to see evidence. We would expect attacks on swimmers. We would expect attacks on divers. We would expect attacks on surfers, sailors, and researchers. Decades of observation fail to reveal that pattern. Instead, the contrast between captivity and the wild becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. In one environment, incidents occurred. In the other, despite countless opportunities, they largely did not. Difference suggests that context matters enormously. Environment matters enormously. Social structure matters enormously. What makes the comparison even more fascinating is that wild orcas often appear more behaviorally complex than their captive counterparts. In nature, they hunt cooperatively. They teach their young. They adapt strategies. They maintain cultural traditions. They navigate intricate social relationships. In many respects, they operate at the highest level of their capabilities. Yet, this is also where the pattern of non-predation toward humans remains strongest. The contradiction is striking. If aggression toward humans were an inherent feature of orca behavior, the wild should reveal it most clearly. Instead, the opposite appears true. The more natural the environment becomes, the more consistent the pattern becomes. This realization forces us back toward the original mystery. Captivity proves something important. It proves that an orca is fully capable of killing a human. No serious observer disputes that. Capability was never the question. Choice was the question. And when we look beyond concrete tanks and artificial environments, when we return to the open ocean where orca culture evolved over millions of years, we find ourselves confronting the same puzzle once again. An animal powerful enough to kill humans encounters them repeatedly. It notices them, it understands they are there. Somehow the outcome remains remarkably consistent. Captivity proves what orcas can do. The wild reveals what they choose to do. Captivity proves what orcas can do. The wild reveals what they choose to do. Yet, even in the wild, there are moments when orcas behave in ways that leave scientists searching for answers. These moments do not involve attacks on swimmers. They do not involve hunting humans. Instead, they involve something stranger, something that seems almost designed to challenge our assumptions about, how intelligent animals interact with the world around them. Beginning in the waters surrounding the Iberian Peninsula, sailors started reporting unusual encounters. At first, the stories sounded isolated. A yacht experiences unexpected contact. A rudder is damaged. An orca is seen nearby. Incidents like this are not unheard of in the ocean. Animals investigate unfamiliar objects all the time. But as the reports accumulated, a pattern emerged. More boats experienced similar interactions. More crews described comparable behavior, and one detail appeared again and again. The orcas were not attacking people. They were focusing on the boats themselves, particularly the rudders. The reports came from waters off Spain and Portugal, where a small population of Iberian orcas lives. These animals already occupied a unique ecological niche. Their numbers were relatively limited. Researchers knew many individuals by sight. Over time, observers began documenting a series of encounters in which orcas approached vessels and made repeated contact with steering systems. Some boats suffered minor damage, others experienced more serious problems. In a handful of cases, vessels became temporarily disabled. Media coverage quickly followed. Headlines appeared around the world. Some described the behavior as revenge. Others suggested rebellion. A few portrayed the orcas as launching coordinated attacks against humanity itself. The reality was both less sensational and far more interesting. Scientists studying the phenomenon urged caution almost immediately, pointed out that dramatic explanations often appear long before evidence does. Challenge was understanding what the animals were actually doing. Because, unlike predation, this behavior had no obvious precedent. Orcas were not attempting to eat the boats. They were not targeting people in the water. Their attention seemed focused on a specific part of the vessel. Again and again, reports described contact with rudders. Again and again, witnesses observed similar patterns. This raised a fascinating question. Why rudders? The answer remains uncertain. Several possibilities have emerged. One explanation involves curiosity. Intelligent animals frequently investigate novel objects. Dolphins, crows, primates, and many other species demonstrate exploratory behavior. They interact with unfamiliar items simply to learn about them. Orcas may be doing something similar. A moving rudder produces sound. It generates vibration. It behaves differently from most objects encountered in nature. To an inquisitive animal, it may be interesting. Another possibility involves play. Play is often misunderstood as frivolous, but in intelligent species it serves important functions. It allows experimentation. It allows learning. It allows animals to explore possibilities without immediate survival pressure. Young predators often practice behaviors through play, long before using them seriously. Adult animals continue engaging in playful activities throughout life. Researchers have documented play behavior in wild orcas for decades. They manipulate objects. They interact with floating debris. They engage in social games. The rudder interactions could represent an extension of this tendency. Yet, even if play or curiosity initiated the behavior, another factor appears to have helped it spread. Social learning. This is where the story becomes especially relevant to everything we have learned far. Because one of the most remarkable aspects of the Iberian encounters is not the behavior itself, it is how the behavior appears to move through the population. Researchers noticed that specific individuals seemed particularly involved during the early stages. Over time, additional animals began participating. This pattern looked familiar. It resembled the transmission of cultural knowledge observed elsewhere in orca societies. A behavior appears. Other members observe it. Behavior spreads. This process has been documented in numerous species, but orcas are especially capable of it because of their social structure. They live within communities where information flows between individuals. They watch one another. They learn from one another. They imitate successful or interesting behaviors. In human terms, ideas spread through societies. In orca societies, behaviors can spread in a surprisingly similar way. The implication is extraordinary. It suggests that the rudder interactions may not simply be isolated actions performed by individual animals. They may represent a socially transmitted behavior, a learned phenomenon moving through a community. If true, provides another glimpse into how flexible orca intelligence can be. Flexibility is one of the defining characteristics of advanced cognition, the ability to respond to new situations, the ability to experiment, the ability to modify behavior based on experience. Throughout this documentary, we have repeatedly encountered evidence of these qualities. Hunting strategies passed through generations, communication traditions maintained within families, specialized diets preserved by culture. The Iberian encounters fit into that broader pattern. They reveal animals interacting with something evolution never prepared them for: modern human technology. Boats are not natural prey. Rudders do not exist in nature. Yet, orcas are finding ways to engage with them anyway. Willingness to explore may be one of the keys to understanding the species, because curiosity can be enormously valuable in complex environments. An animal willing to investigate new opportunities may discover resources, strategies, or information unavailable to less flexible species. Of course, curiosity also creates uncertainty. Scientists remain careful when interpreting the Iberian encounters precisely because motivation is difficult to measure. Humans often project intentions onto animals. We imagine emotions and narratives that may not exist. Temptation becomes especially strong when dealing with intelligent species. It is easy to describe the behavior as revenge, easy to imagine a dramatic story. Much harder to admit uncertainty. Researchers generally prefer the second approach. They acknowledge what they know and what they do not know. They know the animals are targeting rudders more often than expected by chance. They know the behavior appears socially transmitted. They know it reflects considerable awareness and coordination. What remains unclear is why the behavior began in the first place. Yet uncertainty does not diminish the significance of the phenomenon. If anything, it enhances it, because mysteries are often most revealing when they expose the limits of our understanding. The Iberian orcas remind us that intelligence does not always produce predictable outcomes. Intelligent animals experiment. They innovate. They surprise us. They create situations that force scientists to ask new questions. Perhaps that is the most important lesson hidden within these encounters. First, they demonstrate that orcas are not passive participants in their environment. They are active observers, active learners, active decision makers. They notice changes. They respond to novelty. They interact with the world in ways that continue to challenge expectations. This brings us back to humans. Because every boat interaction, every investigation, curious approach reinforces a point that has become impossible to ignore. Orcas are aware of us. They are aware of our presence. They are aware of our technology. They are aware of our activity. The evidence for that awareness grows stronger every year. Yet, awareness alone does not explain behaviour. In fact, it makes the central mystery even more compelling. Once we accept that orcas recognise us, once we accept that they notice our vessels, our sounds, our movements, and our existence within their environment, then the question changes. The question is no longer whether they know we are there. The question becomes how they classify us. What category do humans occupy in the orca mind? Why does curiosity appear so much more common than predation? Why do interactions that could become dangerous so often remain exploratory instead? The answer may lie somewhere within the same cultural and cognitive systems that allowed hunting traditions to spread across generations, somewhere within the same intelligence that created wave hunts, beach hunts, and socially learned behaviours. Because if the last few decades have taught scientists anything, it is that orcas are paying attention. Much more attention than we once imagined. Orcas may not hunt humans, but they are clearly studying our world. Orcas may not hunt humans, but they are clearly studying our world. And once that idea takes hold, the mystery begins to change shape. Earlier, the question seemed simple. Why don't orcas attack humans? But after examining their intelligence, their culture, their hunting traditions, and their interactions with people, a different question starts to emerge. Perhaps the real mystery is not why they avoid us. Perhaps the real mystery is why they never learned to see us as food in the first place. Because when scientists discuss this subject, they rarely begin with morality. They do not suggest that orcas spare humans out of kindness. Nature does not usually operate through kindness. Predators hunt, because hunting is how they survive. The question is not whether an animal is good or bad. The question is whether it recognizes something as prey. That distinction may seem subtle, but it changes everything. Imagine walking through a forest and seeing hundreds of plants around you. Some are edible, some are not. Unless you have learned which ones belong in each category, they are simply plants. A similar principle exists throughout nature. Predators do not automatically attack every living thing they encounter. They specialize, they learn, they develop preferences, they recognize patterns. This is true even among animals far less intelligent than orcas. Lion is capable of killing many creatures it never attempts to hunt. A shark is capable of biting many things it does not normally eat. Predators are selective, because being selective is often advantageous. Hunting carries risk. Hunting requires energy. Mistakes can be costly. The idea that a predator attacks anything vulnerable is largely a human invention. The reality is much more complicated. In the case of orcas, that complexity appears to reach extraordinary levels. One of the leading explanations proposed by scientists involves prey recognition. Its simplest, prey recognition refers to an animal's ability to identify what belongs on its menu. This process can involve instinct, learning, or a combination of both. A young predator enters the world with certain predispositions, but experience shapes those predispositions over time. In a highly social species, learning becomes especially important. Orcas are perhaps one of the clearest examples of this principle. Throughout the documentary, we have repeatedly encountered evidence that different populations maintain different diets. Some focus on salmon, some focus on marine mammals, some target sharks. Others rarely interact with them. These differences persist for generations. Prey selection were determined entirely by instinct. Such diversity would be difficult to explain. Instead, the evidence suggests that young orcas learn what food is by watching the animals around them. This may be one of the most important clues in the entire mystery. Because humans are conspicuously absent from those traditions, imagine an orca calf growing up within a pod. Every lesson it receives comes from older relatives. Every hunt it witnesses reinforces a particular understanding of the world. Certain animals are pursued, certain animals are ignored, certain sounds matter, certain behaviors matter. Over time, these patterns become normal. They become expectations, they become reality. If humans never appear within that educational framework, then each new generation inherits the same assumption. Humans are not prey, because humans have never been prey. This theory aligns remarkably well with what scientists observe in the wild. When orcas encounter people, they do not appear confused. They do not appear frightened. They do not appear especially interested in hunting. Instead, they often behave as though they are encountering something unusual, but not edible. Something worth investigating, perhaps, but not pursuing. Another theory focuses on nutritional familiarity. Predators evolve alongside their prey. Over time, they become adapted to specific food sources. Their hunting strategies, sensory systems, and behaviors develop around those targets. Humans simply do not fit naturally within the ecological niche occupied by wild orcas. We are not marine mammals in the same way seals are marine mammals. We do not move through the water in familiar patterns. We do not occupy the environments where most traditional prey is found. From an evolutionary perspective, humans may represent an unfamiliar category. Unfamiliarity matters. Predators often display caution toward unfamiliar food sources. Eating the wrong thing can be dangerous. Chasing the wrong target can waste valuable energy. Evolution tends to reward efficiency. Animals that focus on proven food sources generally perform better than animals that attack everything they encounter. This brings us to another important concept: risk versus reward. Every hunt involves a calculation, whether conscious or unconscious. Energy is invested. Time is invested. Injury is possible. The reward must justify the effort. A seal provides a predictable outcome. Fish provides a predictable outcome. A whale calf provides a predictable outcome. Humans are different. From the perspective of a wild orca, there may be little incentive to experiment, particularly when traditional prey is already available. Proust. Some researchers have suggested that intelligence itself may reinforce this selectivity. The more sophisticated an animal becomes, the less likely it may be to engage in random predatory behavior. Intelligent predators often display restraint. They learn which opportunities are worthwhile and which are not. They become efficient. They become selective. Orcas fit this pattern remarkably well. Their hunting strategies reveal planning. Their social structures reveal learning. Their cultural traditions reveal consistency. Everything about them suggests a predator that makes choices carefully rather than impulsively. This is one reason curiosity and predation are so important to distinguish. Throughout history, people encountering wild orcas have frequently described curiosity. The animals approach, they investigate, they observe, yet observation does not automatically lead to attack. Humans often confuse attention with aggression because we instinctively associate predators, danger. But for a highly intelligent animal, investigation may simply be a way of gathering information. A young orca may examine an unfamiliar object without intending harm. An adult may alter its course briefly to inspect something unusual. Such behavior reveals awareness, not necessarily predation. The distinction matters because many of the most famous human-orca encounters fit this pattern. The animals appear interested. They do not appear hungry. They appear engaged. They do not appear focused on feeding. Scientists are correct. This may tell us something profound about how orcas categorize the world. Categories are powerful. Humans use them constantly. We separate objects into groups. We distinguish between friend and stranger, food and non-food, danger and safety. Orcas may be doing something similar. Not in a human way, but in a way that reflects their own intelligence and experience. If humans occupy a category separate from prey, then countless observations suddenly make more sense. Divers become unusual visitors rather than targets. Boats become objects of curiosity rather than food sources. Swimmers become anomalies rather than opportunities. This interpretation remains a theory, but it is a theory supported by a growing body of evidence. It explains why different populations maintain distinct diets. It explains why prey traditions persist across generations. It explains why encounters with humans tend to follow consistent patterns despite occurring across different oceans, different cultures of orcas. Most importantly, it explains why the absence of attacks appears so remarkably stable. Because if humans were never included in the cultural definition of prey, then the behavior observed today is exactly what we would expect to see. Yet there is something even more fascinating hidden within this explanation. If culture influences prey selection, then the answer to our original question may not lie primarily in genetics. It may not lie primarily in instinct. It may lie in knowledge. Knowledge passed from mother to calf. Knowledge passed from grandmother to family. Knowledge carried through generations of social learning. The implications are extraordinary. They suggest that one of the most important factors shaping the relationship between humans and wild orcas is not biology alone. It is tradition. The same force that teaches an orca where to hunt may also teach it what not to hunt. The same cultural inheritance that preserves hunting techniques may also preserve boundaries. And if that is true, then the mystery that brought us here begins to look less like an accident of nature and more like a consequence of something far more remarkable. The answer may not be instinct. It may be culture. The answer may not be instinct. It may be culture. And if culture shapes behavior, then we are forced toward an even deeper question. What exactly do orcas think when they encounter a human? It is one of those questions that sits at the edge of science. Researchers can observe behavior. They can analyze patterns. They can measure responses. But they cannot climb inside the mind of an orca. They cannot directly experience the world through its senses. Yet every year, new discoveries reveal clues about how these animals process information. And the picture that emerges is unlike anything people once imagined. For most of human history, intelligence was viewed as something uniquely human. Other animals could be clever. They could solve simple problems. They could learn through repetition. But true intelligence, many believed, belonged to us alone. Over time, that certainty began to erode. Chimpanzees demonstrated complex social strategies. Crows solved puzzles. Elephants displayed extraordinary memory. Dolphins revealed remarkable communication abilities. Again and again, nature challenged assumptions, because may represent one of the most fascinating challenges of all. Because they combine intelligence with social complexity, cultural inheritance, communication, cooperation, and long lifespans. The result is an animal that appears to experience the world in ways that are difficult for humans to fully comprehend. One reason scientists find orcas so compelling is their ability to recognize patterns. Pattern recognition lies at the heart of intelligence. Every day humans rely on it. We identify faces, we recognize voices, we predict outcomes, we categorize information. The world becomes manageable because our brains organize it into meaningful patterns. Orcas appear to do something similar. They identify family members. They recognize calls associated with specific groups. They distinguish between different prey species. They learn hunting strategies and apply them under changing conditions. None of this would be possible without sophisticated pattern recognition. Consider the complexity of an orca's environment. The ocean is not a simple place. Visibility changes constantly. Weather changes. Prey behavior changes. Social relationships change. Yet, orcas navigate this complexity successfully throughout their lives. They recognize opportunities. They recognize threats. They recognize individuals. Every one of these abilities depends on interpreting information and organizing it into categories. This becomes particularly interesting when humans enter the picture. Because humans are unusual from an orca's perspective. We do not move like seals. We do not sound like fish. We do not resemble whales. We do not fit neatly into any category that existed throughout most of orca evolutionary history. Yet the animals encounter us often enough that we cannot simply be ignored as irrelevant background noise. They notice us, they investigate us, they respond to our presence. Somewhere within their cognitive world, humans occupy a place. The question is what kind of place? Some of the most intriguing clues come from studies involving social cognition. Social cognition refers to an animal's ability to understand relationships, intentions, and behaviors within its social environment. Among humans, this ability is highly developed. We constantly interpret the actions of others. We infer motives. We anticipate reactions. We imagine perspectives different from our own. While scientists remain cautious about applying human concepts directly to animals, there is growing evidence that orcas possess sophisticated social awareness. Their lives depend on it. Maintaining lifelong relationships requires recognition. Coordinating hunts requires recognition. Passing knowledge through generations requires recognition. Family members must understand one another well enough to function as a cohesive unit. Researchers have observed behaviors suggesting that orcas pay close attention, not only to what other individuals do, but to how those individuals behave under different circumstances. Such observations hint at a level of social intelligence far beyond simple instinct. The possibility becomes even more fascinating when combined with evidence of problem solving. Throughout the documentary, we have encountered examples of orcas adapting to challenges. Wave hunting, beach hunting, coordinated attacks, socially learned behaviors spreading through populations. None of these strategies emerged from rigid programming. They required experimentation, learning, and refinement. In other words, they required minds capable of processing information and generating solutions. Problem solving is often viewed as one of the clearest indicators of advanced cognitions because it reveals flexibility. An animal is presented with a challenge. Instead of relying on a fixed response, it develops a new one. Orcas demonstrate this flexibility repeatedly. The Iberian rudder interactions may be another example. The hunting traditions observed in different populations certainly are. Every one of these behaviors suggests an animal capable of thinking beyond immediate instinct. That realization naturally leads toward one of the most controversial topics in animal cognition: self-awareness. Scientists have spent decades exploring whether certain animals possess some form of self-recognition. One famous method involves mirror tests. While these tests are imperfect and not universally accepted, they attempt to determine whether an animal recognizes itself as an individual, rather perceiving its reflection as another creature. Research involving dolphins, close relatives of orcas, has produced intriguing results. While direct studies involving orcas are more limited, many researchers suspect that similar capacities may exist. If true, the implications are profound. Self-awareness changes how an organism experiences the world. It allows distinctions between self and other. It creates opportunities for more sophisticated social understanding. Again, caution is important. Scientists avoid making claims beyond available evidence. Yet, the possibility remains difficult to ignore, given everything else we know about these animals. Perhaps the most compelling question emerging from all of this is how orcas categorize the world around them. Categories simplify complexity. Humans do it constantly. We distinguish between food and non-food, friend and stranger, threat and opportunity. These categories shape behavior. They influence decisions. They determine how we respond to unfamiliar situations. Orcas likely possess their own systems of categorization, not necessarily identical to ours, but functional within their environment. We know they distinguish between prey species. We know they distinguish between family groups. We know they distinguish between vocal traditions. We know they distinguish between behaviors worth learning and behaviors worth ignoring. Classification appears central to how they navigate the world. This brings us back to humans. Every piece of evidence points toward the same conclusion. Humans do not appear to occupy the category of prey. The encounters we examined earlier support this. The hunting traditions support this. The absence of attacks supports this. Yet simply saying humans are not prey may not go far enough. Because if orcas are as intelligent as the evidence suggests, then they may not merely ignore us. They may actively recognize us as something else. What that category might be remains one of the most fascinating and unanswered questions in marine science. Some researchers speculate that humans are perceived as unusual animals. Others suggest that repeated interactions have allowed certain populations to develop familiarity with us. Still, others argue that our behavior, appearance, and ecological role make us fundamentally different from traditional prey species. The truth may involve elements of all three. What matters is that the pattern remains remarkably consistent. Orcas do not behave as though humans belong within the same mental category as seals, dolphins, or whales. The distinction appears deeply embedded. This possibility becomes especially striking when viewed through the lens of curiosity. Curiosity implies interest without aggression. It implies investigation without predation. Many of the most memorable human-orca encounters fit precisely that description. The animals approach, they observe, they gather information, then they leave. Such behaviour makes perfect sense if humans occupy a unique category. An unfamiliar but recognisable presence, something worth understanding but not pursuing. The idea remains speculative, but it aligns with an extraordinary amount of evidence. More importantly, it aligns with what we know about intelligence. Intelligent animals do not merely react. They interpret, they classify, they evaluate. If orcas possess the cognitive sophistications suggested by decades of research, then it becomes increasingly difficult to imagine humans as just another object drifting through their environment. We matter to them in some way, not as prey, not necessarily as friends, but as something distinct, something recognizable, something that occupies its own place within the mental map they used to understand the world. And if that interpretation is correct, then the most surprising possibility is not that orcas ignore us. It is that they recognize us. It is that they recognize us. By this point, the mystery that began at the surface of the ocean looks very different from the one we started with. But at first, the question seemed simple. Why have wild orcas never killed a human? It sounded like the kind of fact that belongs in a trivia book or a wildlife documentary. An interesting detail, an unusual statistic, curiosity hidden somewhere within the natural world. But the deeper we followed the story, the more that question expanded into something much larger. Because the answer was never going to be found by looking at humans. The answer was always hidden within the lives of the orcas themselves. Hidden within their intelligence, hidden within their culture, hidden within the way knowledge travels across generations in the open ocean. Along the way, we met one of the most extraordinary predators that has ever lived. An animal powerful enough to hunt great white sharks, powerful enough to hunt seals from floating ice, powerful enough to chase whales many times its own size. Phos. An animal capable of coordinating attacks with family members, communicating across great distances, and adapting hunting strategies to environments scattered across the globe. We discovered that orcas are not simply hunters. They are specialists, teachers, problem solvers. Individuals born into societies that existed long before any human learned to cross an ocean. They inherit traditions. They inherit knowledge. They inherit an understanding of the world passed down from mothers to calves, and from grandmothers to entire family lines. Every generation begins where the last one ended. Every generation carries pieces of a culture that may stretch back centuries. Perhaps that is where the mystery stopped being a mystery and started becoming an answer. Because throughout this story, one fact remained unchanged. Humans are not absent from the orcas' world. We are not invisible to them. We are not overlooked. Again and again, the evidence showed the opposite. Divers entered the water beside them. Sailors encountered them. Researchers followed them for decades. Swimmers crossed paths with them. Entire pods approached boats, investigated objects, altered course to inspect unfamiliar things, and displayed levels of awareness that are difficult to ignore. If the story were simply that orcas never noticed humans, there would be no mystery at all. But they do notice us. That is what makes everything so fascinating. They notice us and then choose a different path. Imagine for a moment what the ocean looks like from the perspective of an orca. It is a world shaped by sound, a world shaped by memory, a world filled with patterns learned over a lifetime. Every hunt reinforces those patterns. Every successful meal reinforces those patterns. Every lesson passed from one generation to another reinforces those patterns. Somewhere within that understanding of the world are categories. Animals that are food, animals that are not. Sounds that matter, sounds that do not, behaviours worth paying attention to, behaviours worth ignoring. Humans appear to exist somewhere outside the categories that define prey. We are recognised but not pursued, investigated but not hunted, observed but not targeted. The distinction may seem small from a human perspective. From an evolutionary perspective, it is enormous. Predators survive by making decisions. Good decisions keep them alive. Bad decisions can injure them, waste energy, or reduce opportunities. The most successful predators are often the most selective. They know what works. They know what belongs within their hunting world. Orcas have spent millions of years refining that understanding. Their choices are not random. Their behaviour is not chaotic. Their hunting traditions are among the most sophisticated in the animal kingdom, which makes the absence of humans from those traditions even more remarkable. There is another lesson hidden within this story. For centuries, humans often viewed intelligence as a force that separates us from nature. We imagined ourselves standing apart from other animals, yet the lives of orcas suggest something different. Intelligence exists on a spectrum. It takes different forms. It evolves under different circumstances. Human intelligence built cities, ships, and satellites. Orca intelligence built cultures carried entirely through memory. Human intelligence transformed landscapes. Orca intelligence transformed the way a predator hunts, communicates, teaches, and survives. Both paths produced complexity. Paths produced knowledge. The difference is that one unfolded beneath the surface of the sea, largely unseen by human eyes. People hear the phrase "kill a whale." They often imagine raw power, teeth, speed, violence. Yet after looking closely at these animals, power begins to feel like the least interesting thing about them. Many predators are powerful. Few are capable of creating traditions. Few are capable of passing specialized knowledge across generations. Few appear capable of learning behaviors that spread through populations almost like ideas. Fewer still leave scientists asking questions about culture, awareness, and cognition. In many ways, true story of the orca is not a story about predation. It is a story about information. Information remembered, information shared, information preserved. The wave hunting techniques of Antarctica are information. The beach hunting traditions of Patagonia are information. The dialects carried by family groups are information. The hunting preferences that separate one population from another are information. Plot. The apparent absence of humans from their world of prey may be information too. Information inherited for generations so long that it now feels natural. Information repeated countless times until it became part of the fabric of orca society. Of course, science rarely deals in certainty. Researchers continue studying these animals. New discoveries emerge every year. Questions remain unanswered. There is still much we do not know about how orcas think, how they perceive the world, and how they interpret the creatures around them. Future research may reveal details that surprise us. New theories may emerge. New evidence may reshape old assumptions. That is the nature of science. But even with those uncertainties, one conclusion stands out. The relationship between humans and wild orcas is unlike the relationship humans have almost any other large predator on Earth. It is not based on dominance. It is not based on fear. It is not based on physical ability. Anything, it appears to be based on recognition. Not friendship, not affection, recognition, the recognition that humans belongs somewhere outside the hunting traditions that define an orca's world. Perhaps that is the most astonishing possibility of all. Not that orcas are too weak to harm us. Not that they fail to notice us, not that they are incapable of making us prey, but that one of the most intelligent predators on Earth may understand enough about the world to decide that we are something else entirely. Somewhere tonight, far from any coastline, an orca pod is moving through dark water. The ocean around them is silent to human ears, but alive with sound to theirs. Mothers travel beside calves. Families follow routes older than memory. Knowledge passes quietly from one generation to the next. They are hunting, communicating, teaching, toast, living lives shaped by traditions millions of years in the making. And if a human happened to enter that world tomorrow, the evidence gathered across decades suggests the outcome would probably be the same as it has always been. The orcas would notice, they would know, the human was there. They might approach, they might investigate, they might simply continue on their way, because the ocean's most capable predator has never killed a human in the wild. Not because it is harmless, not because it is unaware, but because, for reasons rooted in intelligence, culture, learning, memory, and generations of inherited behavior, humans do not appear to belong in the orca's world of prey. And that may be one of the most extraordinary relationships between predator and human that has ever existed on Earth.